Hello, hello, hello. What's going on, KO family? Um, it's Pastor Frankie. I'm just going to get on for walking through the Bible. So if you can see, if you can hear, say what's up. Let me see everybody, and then we'll get into walking through the Bible. Today, I'm going to go over, let me see what I got here. Second Samuel verses chapters 19 through 21. I'm going to be picking up where Psalmist Sarah, left off with Absalom and Joab. Hello, hello. So I'm gonna pick up from there, and I'm gonna continue this narrative. And I made a bunch of notes, very basically to summarize this story, so we can follow, the account of everything going on. I'm gonna be doing a lot of reading, not a lot, but I'll be going back and forth, kind of reading my notes and going over to explain what is happening. And we'll be in and out here in like 15 minutes max. All right. So Sarah finished in chapter 18 a couple of days ago. I think my mic is working. So in chapter 18, we see that Joab murdered Absalom, and it was against the will of David. So what happens there? We pick up in chapter 19. It says David is he's going through intense mourning over the death of Absalom, to the point that it causes the people of Israel to feel like the victory wasn't even a victory. They feel like the victory that they just experienced was a defeat because of the way that the king was expressing his emotion towards his son. So it was a victory for all, but if the king wasn't feeling like he won, then everybody was feeling down. There's no celebration, some triumph, nothing concerning that. So Joab, maybe not appreciating that David knows what happened. Hey, Tamika, what's going on? He warns David that if he persists behaving this way, that people are basically gonna start not following him. They're gonna turn against him because they see that we won this war. Why are you not celebrating, or why are you making us feel in this way? So on tells him this, and what we see is that David now kind of follows the advice that Joab gives him, and he goes to his gate to speak to the people, to be a ruler, to be a judge over them. And it's a different type of gate. We see it's like kind of the gate is the safest place in the kingdom. So there's what the rulers go, the judges go to reign over his people. So David assumes the duties of kingship and takes his seat at the gateway of the city. Then the people come to him. So once he becomes aware of what's going on and he starts treating people like the king that he is, then people start coming back to him. And then the Israelites that fled from battle when Absalom was slain, when Absalom died, and then has a Joab now debate about bringing David back as king of Israel. But his cause keeps growing. And then through his friends, if you read it, through his friends Zadok, Abiathar, the priest, and through the offering of Amasa leadership of the place of Joab, David asks and gets the support of Judah to bring him back as king over all of Israel. To demonstrate this, Judah invites him back and goes over to meet him at Gilgal to bring him back across the Jordan. Now, verses 16 through 40. Now we see blessings. What's going on, everybody? Verses 16 through 40. This is why I have to summarize it. It's a lot going on here. We see the welcoming party back to Israel. And one important person in this welcoming party is Shimei, who cursed David, who threw stones at him. He was there with 1,000 Benjamites, and Ziba, and Saul's old steward, and Jonathan's supposed servant. All right. David now has dealings with different people. So now he has to deal with all kinds of different people. He graciously, even though Shimei insulted him, threw stones at him, got people against him, David still allows him to live. This is how the heart of David was concerning people, that he still allows him to live as a king. As a king, he can make any judgment. And if someone presents, unfavorable behavior against him, then basically whoever is a king against the king openly, they usually get slain and they died. But David showed him mercy despite pressure from Abishai. So he restores his relationship with Mephibosheth. So if you know who he is a grandson of Saul, and we know that he didn't have any strength in his legs. He was lame. But David, the way that he treated him, he brought him to the king's table, and then Mephibosheth said, I don't need anything else other than this. I'm at the king's table. I don't. He was just grateful for the fact that David remembered who he was, and he honored him and brought him back as one of his sons. So there's a lot to go, and that story is very beautiful. There's a lot when it comes to Mephibosheth. Just study him specifically, study his story, and study the reason why David brought him back to the king's table. All right? A lot of you are coming back to the king's table. I'm going to leave it like that. He restored his relationship with him on hearing that Mephibosheth was cheated by Ziba, and we go into that. So he offers to share out between Mephibosheth and Ziba that which he gave to Ziba. All right, we're almost done with chapter 19. And then Mephibosheth is so pleased, and he wants nothing else. David rewards his ancient supporter, Barzillai and the Gileadite, by promising to deal well with his nominee Shimham. So you got to read the whole story to understand what's going on here. So King David is back in business in the kingdom. He is setting everything together. He's putting everything in place. He is honoring people. He's being merciful. He's doing everything. He's getting back with his people. He is being at the gate. He is establishing order when he comes back into reign. In verses 41 to 43, we start with dangerous tribal kind of issues and jealousy between Israel and Judah start to emerge. Both now want to claim David exclusively as king, but David wants to rule over both of them. All right, and we see, Israel. We understand the northern kingdom, Judah. All of these things, if it comes into, it's important for us to understand this context to see what's going on, the separation of these kingdoms, and David just wants to rule over both of them. So in 2 Samuel, that was just David coming back into rulership. In 2 Samuel chapter 20, we see rebellion. All right, so we see Sheba leads Israel to rebel against David, while Judah remains faithful to him. All right, so on David's return to his house in Jerusalem, he cares for the concubines that he left there, but has no sexual relations with them. David's new commander, Amasa, is told to assemble the men of Judah to pursue Sheba. This is chapter 20, verse 4 through 7. And he does not do this with though he gives his instructions to assemble the men of Judah to pursue Sheba, but he does not do this within the 3-day limit set. So David appoints another commander, Abishai, not Joab. We know who Joab is, and we know what Joab did to Absalom. So David is kind of conscious what's going on here. So he sets Abishai as the commander of his troops to lead his men. So Joab, I don't know why. David was so, his heart was so pure and so nice. So Joab and his men are included in the assembly of the army. So even though Joab, this is so juicy, even though Joab is not the commander of the army, David includes them as the men to be led by the new commander. So this is what happens. When Amasa, the new commander, arrives, Joab murders him with his sword. So now we see the tendency of behavior that Joab has, but he is so close to David. So he murders the new commander by the sword. And then because Joab realizes that David prefers Amasa to him as commander. He says, he felt this jealousy. He's like, you prefer this other man, this other person to be a commander. So he basically takes it upon himself to kill him to be able to be in command of the army. Never mind, but that's not how it works. You can't just kill your commander and say that you're in command. There is a chain of command here. So Joab continues to pursue Sheba. In verses 11 through 13, the army, now we see the army is probably alarmed and is confused at seeing the dead body of the new commander on the road. Man, this could be a movie. So is by the roadside. They hesitate because they see his body. They are not moving because they see the commander, the person who's supposed to be commanding and leading them. They see his body, so they hesitate. So what Joab does, a supporter of Joab who is urging them to follow Joab, he removes the body from the roadside, and the army continues to pursue Sheba. So all that it took was one of the followers of Joab to say, like, okay, let's remove the body, and after the body, after what is ugly, after what is not nice to see is out of the way, out of the vision, out of the peripheral vision of the people, then the people are going to continue doing like nothing happened. That happens a lot. That happens a lot. It's something about whatever is in front of you. If it's not nice, we don't want to follow through. That doesn't look right. But someone else does the dirty work and gets it out of the way, then a lot of people are going to continue and go on their way like nothing happened, because the inconvenience have happened with something that is nasty. Not everybody wants to deal with something that is dirty and that is nasty. So it gets out of the way. They continue to pursue Sheba. In verses 14 to 15, Sheba and his forces retreat to Abel, where David's men, under the rulership of Joab, we're almost done, raise a siege mount against the ramparts of the city, and they begin to go in the city. They begin to pursue Sheba. They begin to the city. They begin to go in the city. And then a wise woman. Y'all need to read this part of the story. I'm telling you, there's so much wisdom. Even though there's treachery in certain things, how things are done in the Bible, there is wisdom behind it to be able to understand the mind of your enemy. So a wise woman inside the city of Abel speaks with Joab, and she tells him they agree that to kill Sheba and deliver him to Joab is better than the surrender and destruction of the whole city. All right, this is what she's doing. And then accordingly, Sheba is beheaded, and his head is thrown to Joab, who withdraws and returns to the king at Jerusalem. Presumably, Joab thinks that the king must be pleased with the result, irrespective of how it happened. Joab is just making the assumption that King David is going to be happy of how this happened. And then in the appointment of David's officers to govern Israel, we still see that Joab it resumes the command of all the army of Israel. All right. But it's important to remember everything that Joab is doing. Remember everything that he's doing right now, and look into and keep reading so you can see how things are going to unravel later on and the explanation behind all that. All right. So we're finished already 19, chapter 20. And now we go into our last chapter real quick, where David is seeking the face of God. We find always David seeking the face of God. I was preaching yesterday about David being a man after the heart of God. And it doesn't matter the decisions that he made. It doesn't matter the things that he did, the mistakes that he made. He was always seeking after the heart of God. So David seeks God after 3 years of famine. God reveals that Saul, listen to this. We're getting into generational curses. We're dealing with things that are past the bloodline and people before us, the mistakes and the things they did. So we see a good example here how God kind of given us a blueprint of things that we have to do to set things in order for prayers to be answered. We don't like to set things in order, but we see a precedence here how we need to set things in order on things of prior mistakes, or even things that people were doing in the past, because we are made responsible as intercessors to ensure that things are made correct before we go into the face of God. So God reveals that Saul's past sins in breaking the covenant with killing the Gibeonites, as we were seeing a couple days ago, must be addressed before they can be a blessing. So the mistakes of Saul, what he did with the Gibeonites, need to be addressed before David's prayer can be answered and there can be a blessing. Things need to be corrected and things need to be put in place. Now David responds to God, and he speaks to the Gibeonites and arranges to have 7 of Saul's family members killed. Right? There is an arrangement that is made to have these seven family members killed. But he keeps the promise to Jonathan, and he doesn't kill Mephibosheth. He keeps him alive. So what he's doing, he's seeking to apply the right principles. He doesn't really have all the answers, but he's after the heart of God, and he's moving prophetically what he needs to do. So he's killing 7 of the family members. Hearing that Rizpah, Saul's concubine, acted to stop the birds from eating the bodies of two of her sons who were hanged, David realizes that he needs to act. He needs to be appropriate. He needs to act with propriety, and he needs to address this situation to be able to find the blessing of God. So what he does is he takes the bones of the men who were hanged, and those of Saul and Jonathan, which had been stolen by the Philistines and by the men of Jabesh Gilead, and he buries them. He buries them. Even like we need to understand, even though the Saul and Jonathan, however the reason they died and how they died, they needed everything needed to be put in place. Everything needed to be corrected in order for the things that God wanted to do be able to continue. How are we going to be able to continue? We know that Saul was chosen by God and he was anointed. And even though the anointing was taken, there was still a level of honor that David, even after the death of Saul, David needed to show that lineage. So just because they had died, we need to ensure that things are put in place as an example, that things that need to put in place in terms of principle, things that are put in place consistently. It's a different type of perspective. But when we talk about integrity, when we talk about honor, you're not expected to just have integrity in front of the people that you're supposed to have integrity in front of. You're supposed to be before, during, and after. You're supposed to be honorable before, during, and after. So we talk about honor, we talk about integrity. Even when they're not looking, there has to be a level of integrity and honor. And guys, and after he removed the bones, he took them back and he buried them. Then things are set back in order because now he's exercising his position, his kingship in the way that he's supposed to be doing. So he takes the bones, he buries them, and when all this is done, God answers the prayer. Look at how he is done. Like, let's pay attention to what's going on here, the things that are going on in our family, the things that are going on in our lives, how we have moved. Even though certain things had hurt in the past and we were, quote unquote, victim of someone else's behavior, we need to ensure that there's still honor, that there's still respect, that we are still doing what we need to do to show ourselves approved in the face of God. And then we will be able to see how things are falling in place and certain prayers start being answered, and even Jesus addresses this, if you have any issue with your brother and your sister, you make sure you address that before you come and worship him. This is a principle that we see it in this, and then we see it in the New Testament. It's not about a matter of I'm going to ignore this situation and and God is going to bless me. You make sure that you being conscious of everything that is going around, being conscious of the things that happened in the past, the things that you did in the past. Yes, God has forgiven you, but have you taken the initiative to set things in order for you to be able to be and set things in the right place and start moving in the direction that God wants you to move? So God answers the prayer after all of this is done, and then the famine is over. So from chapter 19 to 20 and 21, we see that there's a precedence of him setting things in order in the best way that he can, following the guidance of God. And then after that point, we see now that he is reigning over the entirety of both kingdoms. We see now that he has structure in his government. We see now that he has a connection with his people. And now that he has exercised the things that God has told him to do, he's still honored and he set things in place. Now he has blessed his kingdom, and now there's no more famine, and God answered his prayer. And now we're going to finish here. We've been 20 minutes. I need to hurry up because sometimes there's things that we need to correct before we come. We got to come correct to God before certain things are addressed. It's not just about us; it's about everything around us. And then David, we finish it that David has his life threatened by a Philistine who is killed by Abishai. Y'all need to read the men that were with David. Let me get out of here. Because towards the end of chapter 21, we see that King David, his life is being threatened by these giants, right? It's not just he killed Goliath. He killed Goliath. And by killing Goliath, he positioned himself to have the position, the power, and the authority, the kingship that he has. And then after he positioned himself throughout his life, he started gathering people that were after his heart. You know, he was after the heart of God, and there were men that saw who he was and they were after his heart. And they were looking to protect him, to be with him, to befriend him, to do whatever it took to ensure that he was alive. So when these giants came after David, the Bible talks about, one of them had a javelin that was like, I don't know what 300 shekels is, but that is heavy. One of them had 6 fingers and 6 toes, 24 in total. There were these giants of movies that were coming after David. But the men that were covering David said, as long as we are here with you, you don't have to fight these men. So we see that David, initially, he sowed a seed in battle. But after he sowed that seed in battle and God positioned him, he didn't have to fight his own battles anymore. God surrounded him by people that were basically intercessors, the people that were fighting for him in the moments that he was in weakness, in the moments that his mind was so in many different directions. There were men that were able to slay giants on his behalf, because he had to deal with the whole kingdom. He had to deal with other things that he didn't have time to buy. While he still had the ability to do it, he didn't have the time for it. It's not always going to be the man of God that has to fight all your battles. Sometimes we have to help the man of God fight. Why am I going here? Sometimes we have to help the man or woman of God fight. Sometimes we have to be their giants. I don't know about you, but we need to move into a place, because of the places that we're going to go in the next 5 to 10 years. I'm looking for giants in Kingdom Outreach Church. If you're a giant, I'm looking for warriors to be able to slay these giants. I'm looking for giants to slay. I don't know about you, but it's time to get. Why am I going here? Okay, let me get out of here. I'm looking for warriors. I'm looking for warriors. I'm looking for warriors. David slayed the first one. After that, everybody else was slain for him. All right. So continue reading. This is a movie. It's a great story, a great narrative, a lot of lessons learned. As you can see, I only did a summary and I was here for 24 minutes. But there's so much to take out of this. There's so much to learn. There's so much to appreciate concerning King David. I love you. God bless you. Sister Tamika, Elder, Pastor Tamika, Apostle Des, what's going on, sir? Tanya, Sandy, Miss Sewell, everybody, thank you for coming in. God bless you. And we'll talk later. Let me see who's all here. I don't know who's all here. All right, cool. All right, God bless you.